Hello. Today it's going to be the vertical stack, just basic principles. So, talking about handler, off handler. This is not to scale, obviously. Field proportions are a bit off. Vertically, the stack should not be halfway up the field. But, so a vertical stack. So some basic principles. Typically, you're going to have two handlers out in a vertical stack. 5 cutters. Usually 3, maybe the fourth one will be cutting constantly. Probably just 2 or 3 of them though, with the front 1 or 2 being other handlers. What does a vertical stack do? Right, let's talk about that first. A vertical stack, in the vertical stack, the dead space is right here, right? So you do not want to throw through that space. You might throw over it if you're throwing a hammer from one side of the field to the other for some reason. But this is the dead space. If you don't want to run, get into the middle of the field. If you want to jog, don't. For a vertical stack, generally, there's not a lot of pseudo movement where you're just jogging here and there. You're either cutting, so you should be sprinting, or waiting for your cut. The primary spaces are, so the force is going to be on righty flick, which makes this the force side, so that's the one big space. The break side is the other, and the deep space. Those are the 3 main spaces that you'll be cutting into and out of in a vertical stack. Now, typically, cuts will come from the front and the back of a stack, not the middle. The reason for this, and let me preface this whole discussion by saying any general principles that I espouse here can be broken in the right situation or with a play call, or just if a team learns certain synergistic movements that they like to do. But generally, these statements will hold. So generally, movement is going to be initiated by the front or the back of the stack. To run a good vertical stack requires discipline, because there's not a whole lot of isolation here, right? Everyone's clustered right here, so all the defenders are right there on the force side, and if you're cutting and you cut each other off, your defenders will be able to, one defender will be able to stop 2 people. If 2 people are cutting in the same space, it just takes one of them to hang with them, right? So it takes discipline to understand when it's your time to cut. It takes field awareness to understand what's going on with the handlers and key off of that, and field awareness to see what's going on with the other cutters in the spaces upfield. So some basic principles. Generally, cuts are going to come from the back of the stack and the front of the second vertical stack. Generally, the front of the stack's cuts will be to the break side. The reason for this is it's a good little initiation, high percentage break to utilize. Cuts from the back will be to any given space, but initially, typically, it'll be the force side. Now, the reason that cuts are going to be from the front and the back are because if the defenders are all lined up right next to their men and they take off at strange angles, it's really easy to set picks. So that's why cuts are typically from the front and the back, right? Just to give some semblance of order, typically it's numbered from front to back, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When cutting off on the line, saying so-and-so is going to set the front of the stack, so you're 1, 2, 3, etc. The kind of cuts, the basic cut that people learn, is the triangle cut, so to speak. You cut deep. It's important when you're cutting deep in a vertical stack to not cut like this. You don't cut, well, I'm going to cut deep on the force side, so boom. Because you run out of real estate real quick, and then when you come down this side, it's just not going to be as effective, because if your defender did a good job staying under you, you're not really going to be able to get around the defender unless you're just insanely faster than him, right? And you're going to run out of real estate running in that direction, because by the time the huck goes off, and it gets all the way over there, you'll be out of bounds. And so that's just not useful if you cut deep at an angle to the sideline. What you want to do is cut deep. You want to cut straight deep. This gives your thrower options, because if they can hit a huge inside-out break right here, then that's a wide open throw. There's no defender that's going to be able to get to that if you're matched up relatively evenly, because you'll have the first steps and you'll be in position. If they've got you outmatched, that's another story. But this throw, if the handler has that huck, great. If not, if he has to throw this around huck, still you want to stay in the middle. The reason for this is when hucking, the most effective hucks are going to be so if we divide the deep space into thirds, you want to huck it into a space that is in a different third than you're in. Now, a vertical stack is kind of funky in this, because if you're in the same third here, it kind of breaks that rule. For the purpose of this discussion, let's say we got it in power position, so this person swung it and then struck and catches it right here in power position. So boom, in power position. So now that's ideal. And now at that time you would want to time it so that somebody's going deep. Anyway, so to continue the side note on hucks, you want to huck it from one third into a different third of the field. You don't want to huck it into the same third, because it's very hard to put that perfect, like if he was hucking from here, to put that perfect around huck on either side. It's decently difficult. What it would probably be if it was the IO break is really a break way out there, and this guy would just beat his defender out into that space if it was like that. And the reason for this is putting it perfectly on a line so that it ends up around the defender and right there to meet the offensive player is just extremely difficult. It's a lot easier if I'm in power position here to put it on a relatively straight line into this space, so that anywhere in this area the disc can kind of be caught if you're aiming for this area in the same third, because this guy's because he's coming out of a different third, can meet that wherever he needs to. Or conversely, by being out here and seeing the angle that the defender has, if the offensive player's here and the defensive player's here, I can see, oh, I can target this whole area back here with that around throw, and it's a lot easier to hit that around throw percentage-wise. So it's just a matter of percentages. It's a lot easier to lead somebody into space with intersecting high areas of intersection if they're in a different third of the field. I feel like that was a subpar explanation, but I think that'll do in terms of understanding why you want to hug it to a different third in the deep space. But as for movement, let's get back to that. So typically the triangle cut, you're going into the deep space, boom, you want to go straight deep so you have options on either side and you can see what your defender's doing. And then if your defender is hanging with you step for step on the force side, changing direction should be able to beat them in on the force side. And the first cut should be on the force side for the simple reason, generally, for the simple reason that that's a high percentage completion to get the disc moving. If your defender is just shading you way underneath, but the throw didn't go off, then hook it around the break side. The second cut should probably be the break side anyway if the first isn't. But if you don't get the disc, then you need to clear back to the stack, and that's a hard 100% cut. From the front of the stack, the movement is, if this guy's eyeing you possibly, just take a couple steps out. If you don't get the disc, right back in to the stack, right where you were. I mean, it's not a lot of movement there, not very difficult. What's key is, so that's the basic cutting movement. You can also, I'll demonstrate on the other side, cut in first. If your defender's lined up perfectly even with you and you want to bait them in first and then go deep, do kind of an uppercut thing there. What you would probably have there, though, is your defender will be underneath you all the way because you'll have torched them so bad. So at that point, what you would want to do is then reverse field, do an S-cut, come down the opposite side, and then clear. So that's also a possible movement pattern for that. Those are just some basics of vert stack movement. Hope this was helpful.